very good morning to you. We're live in London and you're with Monocle on Sunday with me, Emma Nelson. Welcome. Coming up, my guests share their views on the week's biggest stories. Brooke and Marta Lorimer are here. Simon, what have you spotted? Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a lot of coverage of the split between Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump. The MAGA coalition seems to be breaking up, some might say. And also what I think is quite a positive story about Britain helping locate more than 600 Ukrainian children that have been forcibly abducted and taken to Russia.
Thank you for that. We also hear the latest from Istanbul.
I'm Hannah Lucinda Smith in Istanbul, and coming up, I'll be talking about a plane crash in Georgia, about the 2,000-year sentence that Turkish prosecutors are seeking for the Istanbul mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, and a temple of Zeus that's been discovered after 40 years.
Plus, we hear from our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, checking in from Portugal. Lots to look forward to. It's the 16th of November, 2025. Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday with Emma Nelson.
And a very good morning to you if you've just tuned in. Joining me around the table, Simon Brooke, journalist, communications consultant. Welcome, Simon.
Good morning.
And Marta Lorimer, lecturer in politics at Cardiff University. You specialise in what, the far right?
Yes, that is my specialism. A very busy time for me.
Giggles all the way. Yes, you must have absolutely suddenly realised. Actually, when do you suddenly realise that a terrible subject such as the far right becomes wildly popular and interesting? Because you must have slightly mixed emotions about this.
Yeah, I do. So when I started working on the far right, it was 2015, I started writing my PhD, and I thought that I was working on a relatively niche phenomenon that was important because of its potential implications for democracy, but that at no point did I expect to become a mainstream phenomenon in the way it has become right now. So for me, I think that 2016 was a turning point, and I think we have just moved into a completely new era in terms of the radical right.
A problematic benefit of this from you is that everybody probably wants to talk to you, and you're now super popular.
Yes, of course, from a career perspective, this has really worked out for me.
Brilliant. How's your week been, Simon?
Yes, good, actually. And we were just saying before we came on air, weren't we, about what a miserable grey day it is in London. It's been like this really most of the week, hasn't it? But yeah, I spent Thursday morning, I think it was, at the National Gallery here in London, looking at paintings by Joseph Wright of Derby, who is a British painter. And he's a bit like Caravaggio in his use of light. So if you're living in a country which is so often grim and dark, seeing paintings which really have this as their focus, this wonderful, brilliant light was, uplifting.
Good fun. Well, I'm glad. Well, so Marta's profiting from the death and destruction of the far right. Simon, fabulously uplifted.
Cheer yourself up, Marta, and go along and see these exhibitions.
Well, listen, you mentioned Caravaggio. Caravaggio is someone who's pretty dark for a lot of his stuff. So,
fascinating character.
It's great. If you're in an idle moment, try and recreate Caravaggio's. There's lots of arms being waved around. It's always good fun. Let's head to Lisbon, where there is no sign of clouds in sight, is there? Tyler Brûlé, our editorial director. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Boom GM. There is definitely blue here. There is there are a few big puffy clouds, though, a little bit to the north of the city. Of course, we've had that storm sort of lashing this side of Europe, not just Portugal, but also bits of Spain and France, and certainly the UK as well has been battered. But it's lifted out, it's moved on, and the sunshine is back. And when that happens here, of course, even at this time of year, it feels positively spring-like. So actually a beautiful day here today.
Let's touch on that storm. The immediate thoughts go to the plants on the balcony. How are they?
The plants on the balcony are practically going to move into the apartment, not just because the weather's bad. I mean, it's amazing when you, of course, leave them and you have them in by for 3 weeks. Sorry, there goes here in Lisbon. Yeah, they just go crazy. And we were actually sort of talking about, what type of serious pruning or hacking is going to have to happen come springtime, because the tropical growth is getting a little bit out of hand, but beautiful and bountiful at the same time. And
the pruning and the hacking will require some extremely good tools and an excellent, probably a sort of a gardening apron. I'm seeing the shopping list now.
Yeah, I'm seeing that shopping list, or I'm seeing support forces called in maybe for that.
Okay, so it's good to have you back in Lisbon. You've been all over the world in the last couple of weeks. How's it going? How's it been?
It's good. Well, last time, of course, we checked in. That was where was I last week? I'm trying to remember. Last Sunday, no, that's right. I was in Hakone. I was at the base of Mount Fuji. But of course, now, on this side of Europe. And it was, last week was a good one because we were getting a lot of things underway, in part just wrapping up year end. But there's another trip back to Japan. We have 2 book launches coming up. So we have the Book of Switzerland. We decided that the Book of Switzerland will be officially launched at the Swiss Embassy in Tokyo on December 4th. And before that, we've just delivered a special project with Hitachi Energy. So we've done a book for them as well. That will also get launched in Tokyo, in Ginza, on December 3rd.
Okay, brilliant. Everybody is writing these dates down furiously. You've sort of summed up your travels through the frame of newspapers and magazines in the last few weeks in your column this morning. And you've taken us on a global journey of what you pick up, where you go and where the good spots are. This is a sort of, they're like little bellwethers of the quality of a city, aren't they?
Well, indeed, and this was we go back to being in Singapore a few weeks ago, and I wanted to do a little spin around Chipty Gardens, where we used to have our bureau, and that is just adjacent to Holland Park Village in Singapore. So a lovely sort of residential community, lots of course, good local retail, and there was an amazing newsstand, which I always used to go to. They were probably one of the best points of sale for us in Singapore as well, called Canby Magazine Store. So I pulled up and jumped out of the car, and I thought, great, I'm going to go and sort of load up on Aussie magazines and various titles I hadn't seen in a while. And Canby's was gone. I thought, was I on the wrong street? Completely disappeared after 80 years, shuttered, and did not reopen. So at first I thought, okay, maybe the Canbys were pushed out by high rents, as often happens everywhere, but that was not the case. They just shuttered, and what a loss. And it's interesting because this is my column today, and already the amount of emails I've received from residents of Singapore who are just, in many ways sort of saddened, and also echoing, why there wasn't more of an outcry about this. Also citing, similar things also happened with the cinema as well in Singapore, and just one day it was there, the next day gone. So I sort of do scratch my head a little bit. Where do people find their magazines in Singapore these days, including their copies of Monocle, Confect, and other great print titles?
Indeed, because it does have a sort of slightly more serious aspect to it for you and for Monocle, because you need Monocle and Confect needs the outlets and needs to be physically present, because there is that thing that we still always fall in love with something on an absolute whim from a cover, from just picking up a magazine. It's something that you kind of forget the joy of.
Well, also in just the joy of also walking into a newsstand and you ask a great news teller what's new, what's out, or if they know you, they tell, by the way, did you see that? I don't know, that they've launched Harper's Bazaar in France. That happened at my newsstand yesterday here in Lisbon. And so there are these sort of, not just serendipitous moments, but if you have that sort of that habit of going to a newsstand, oftentimes people say, well, do you need a newsstand today? Because if you really want to read print, you can just go online. But listen, you can order a single copy of Monocle online, and that's great to sample it that way. But it's much easier to be able to, of course, just go to a great rack of magazines, pull it out and say, do I want to purchase this or not? I think a much easier way of sampling than having to go online, enter your credit card, and of course, wait maybe 24 hours or wait 24 days to get a copy of the magazine.
Even longer in many cases. Okay, so in your column, you sort of spin around Singapore and then you do Hong Kong and Tokyo. Hong Kong and Tokyo fare slightly better than Singapore today, don't they?
They did. So I'm hoping, yes, indeed, hopefully it was a rallying cry for Singapore. And of course, there are still a few good outlets here and there in Singapore where you can, of course, find good print titles. But yeah, not the same as Canby's, which is really on the sidewalk. It was part of the village in Holland Park, and Holland Village, and sadly that is gone. But yes, you get to Hong Kong, and there's a great little, not little, but you wouldn't say it's a huge corporate chain called Bookazine, and it does exactly what it says on the label. It does books, it does magazines. They are really, I feel, a part of sort of every community that they're in Hong Kong. Just a great source or whether it's the latest bestseller, whether you want to pick up the Wall Street Journal, or of course, if you want to have a great selection of magazines from France, from Australia, from Germany, from all over the world, and this real family commitment to delivering it as well. And I was in Repulse Bay, and it was just wonderful to see that in the arcade development there, where they're taking things up market, and oftentimes when things go up market, the bookshop loses out. And in this case, that didn't happen. They relocated them. I would argue they're even in a better location. And yeah, the family behind this company, behind Bookazine, are great. And I'm sort of saying maybe they need to go to Singapore and open up in Holland Village. And maybe get a shutter out there potentially to get a few more bags and books out for the Singaporeans.
Let's bring in Simon Brooke, fresh off a big trip to Japan. Welcome back, Simon.
Thank you.
You're a big magazine reader as well, and when you were on your travels, are you finding that there is a sort of a nicer place to go and find your magazine? Because I was in King's Cross Station yesterday in the United Kingdom, and the main shop that you used to buy your magazines now you can just buy caffeine drinks, and that's all it is, and like you can mainline Haribo until you end up being taken to hospital in an ambulance. But you'd be damned if you can find a good spine to crack when it comes to print.
It is so frustrating, isn't it? Because the number of times I am a big fan of magazines, and as you say, the number of times I want to just buy one, and it's so difficult these days. I end up going to supermarkets. But I think to your point, Tyler, you were saying that people this thing of whether you buy it impulse buy off the rack in a store or whether you get it delivered. I get various magazines delivered because I'm a big fan of them. I love the feel of the paper, and I spend so much time looking at a screen especially during the week. At the weekend, it's actually nice to have a traditional magazine. And I think there's probably a parallel here with books as well. You remember when Kindle came in, everybody said, right, that's the end of the printed book. Nobody will buy these things anymore. But actually, we've seen people buying more books, and people who do what I do, which is you might buy the Kindle version, and then you think, actually, I quite like the hard, the hard copy as well. So I think perhaps there's an element of that with magazines.
Tyler, how many magazines get delivered and are never taken out of their paper? That's the thing that I always struggle with. That they arrive on my doorstep and then they just sit, and about 4 months later, when I'm doing a big clear out, there was a really beautiful copy of a really lovely magazine that will give me my spring looks, whereas I'm now in November, and the time that ship sailed.
Yeah, I think that there is a component of that there's something about your relationship, maybe that feeling of immediacy with the newsstand. There's that impulse to purchase, and then for you take it home, and you want to, I don't know, maybe you want to devour it right away. And something does happen if you're on the road. And listen, I'm all for subscriptions, but they can pile up, and maybe there is that sort of lack of urgency because they somehow arrive in a slower manner. And I see that with many of the weeklies I receive. I get Les Echos from France. I love Les Echos weekend supplement, but of course I'm traveling, and when I get back, there's 3 of them sitting on my table in Zurich, and then you sort of try to devour them in one sitting, and you're just sort of flipping through them, and then as Simon's saying, there's not that sort of sense of enjoyment. Whereas I got on the plane yesterday, and for 2 hours and 15 minutes, I was just with 2 newspapers, 2 supplements, and that really sort of did the entire flight. And that was I think that's just the joy of great print, and also just being able to be off screen. And while I do moan about flights that don't have Wi-Fi these days, it was probably one of the reasons I was off screen, because this was a unconnected or I would say sort of Elon Musk Starlink enabled aircraft.
Yes, we all know how we feel about that. The glorious thing that you've managed to do, Tyler, is you've managed to turn this into clothing this week.
Well, yes, part of it, because one of the reasons why we're in Lisbon is we've got a number of things going on in Portugal. There's a great little, and again, maybe I shouldn't say little, it is a company of some retail scale called Isto, I-S-T-O, and they are committed to making great quality basics, largely for men, but it's good t-shirts, it's great sweatshirts, good worker jackets, etc. And we talked to them, and we said we wanted to do some kind of little pop-up collaboration. And what was great is they came up with an idea. What was sort of the best representation of Lisbon, Portugal, daily life in this country in Monocle. And I sent you a picture before we went on air. They just did this amazing T-shirt with a fantastic, one of those very decorative classic Lisbon kiosks on the back, and just a few people sort of interacting. So, a gentleman going to pick up his paper at this kiosk and representing this sort of beautiful, I think sort of almost slightly Japanese graphic form. And it comes on T-shirts in various colors, long and short sleeve, also sweatshirts as well. So I know it's a nice little marker of maybe the time that we're in right now. Are we going to see a proper bounce back, as Simon says, that there is, we've been through this sort of digital moment, of course, with books. I think a lot of people have chosen to reject the Kindle. I always feel every time on a plane, I just don't see as many people reading off of Kindles as I did maybe 7, 8, 10 years ago.
I haven't seen one for quite some time, actually. I saw one on the tube, actually, a couple of days ago, and just sort of stared at them, wondering what this funny device was. Tyler, what's on the cards for this week? Where are you off to next?
This week, it's a bit of a North America week. We'll be checking in, and I'm taking over the reins of this show from the hosting point of view next week back in Zurich. But it's going to be North America week. Emma, we're in Toronto. So checking in on, of course, our setup on that side of the Atlantic. And then just, we move into, as you well know, it is, we're in the Christmas season. Of course, already decorations are up everywhere. So it is this period where it's Christmas markets. This year will be the first time we've done a Christmas market in Paris. It'll be really one of scale like we do in London and Zurich. So Paris is coming up. And then it's in between Zurich, which kicks off the season 2 weeks from today. It'll be the first Christmas market across Saturday and Sunday in Zurich. Then moves to Paris. And then, of course, the finale, in a way, is London the weekend after. And I think, Emma, you'll be part of some of it, if not all of it.
I will, absolutely. I'll be diving in with both legs. Speaking of preparations for Christmas, I wonder if we could draw everyone's attention to an article in the Daily Telegraph this week, which talks about how to take the perfect Christmas family photo. And it comes up with some pretty obvious things, which are things like have good light, make sure everybody looks sort of halfway happy, but they are usually accompanied with by the missive of what Uncle Jeremy got up to this year, and little Tilly has passed her ballet classes and all that kind of stuff. Tyler, what are your thoughts on the annual delivery of the roundup with picture?
Well, I miss them. There's probably about 3 or 4 families that we can still depend on who send the family Christmas photo, and sometimes it is very beautifully composed, and somehow it sort of looks like it was thrown together before the last day of school. So, but of course, I mean, I can recall, let's rewind 3 decades ago. It felt like everybody did the family photo, and you got the group letter, of course, updating everyone on their ballet skills, everything else. And that has gone away. And I think there's a good essay at this time, because I often sort of found from some corners, of one's, I would say sort of social web, or certainly from one's, broader family, it was that moment to boast, right? And so when you do talk about sporting achievements of 17-year-olds and who got into what university, there was often a lot of eye rolling around the table. But I guess that happens every day now. I mean, that's why social media is I think is there, so you can get this steady stream from probably many family members who are just doing it every day around the clock to talk about how well everyone is. And great, sometimes it is an important health check, etc. But I think oftentimes there's just a little bit of grandstanding as well. So I say bring back a heavy dose of that 3-sheet double-sided family update with, of course, the beautiful family photo on Fujifilm paper.
Yeah, we're on it. We're on it. We're going to have a 3-page missive, if you want, of what we've been up to. Goodness me. Right, Tyler Brûlé into Lisbon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Emma. Bye-bye.
Right, Marta, you were trying to take family photos yesterday.
Yeah, well, not technically family photos, but I was meeting with, I met up with two of my ex-flatmates, and they both have partners, they both have 2 children. So we were in the situation where there are 6 adults and 4 children and trying to take a photo. And I managed to take 3 photos, and in none of them are we all looking at camera. So there's some great advice in there that I don't really know how to implement though, because family Christmas photos in my family are usually a bit of a challenge because there's about 20 of us around the table.
Italian, right?
Yes.
Okay.
My dad has 10 siblings, which means that...
That's a big dinner.
Yeah, we're never all there. But there's usually some of them, and then my cousins, and then my cousins' children. So we've had, I think the biggest Christmas we had one year where there were about 50 of us. These days it's more in the 20s, but that also means that it's difficult to find a space that can accommodate us. And taking a photo when you have 20 people there's always going to be someone missing. There's always going to be someone whose face is obscured by the Christmas tree. And then some child that is trying to run away desperately.
Yeah, dreadful children. There is this thing in this article in the Telegraph, which I'm absolutely fascinated by, that apparently Google has Pixel phones which can put people in pictures who are not there. Brilliant. What an opportunity for mischief.
It's reverse Stalinism.
Yeah, exactly.
It's incredible. I mean, you don't even need to put your relative in there. You could just put
anybody or whoever.
Anybody.
Yeah, here's us with George Clooney, and there's the King in the background there.
Absolutely.
I mean, why not? What a Christmas.
Who are you going to put in your family picture, Simon? What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I have to say, I was thinking, I can completely understand, Marcia. The more people you have, the more difficult it is to take a photograph, isn't it? Because somebody will have their eyes closed or be pulling a silly face if it's a child or something. But I was thinking about this, having interviewed a number of photographers in my career, including Lord Snowdon and David Bailey. I always ask them inevitably, how do you take a good photograph? And one of the lessons that really came across was just take lots of them. It's a kind of numbers game. The more pictures you take, especially if you've got lots of people, the more likely it is that you will find at least one where everybody has their eyes open. Everybody is smiling, and and everybody looks their best. So yeah, just take lots of pictures is apparently the top tip.
It's an interesting article insofar as it says when it gives top tips from people who have actually taken photographs of the royal family. It says when you're photographing your own family, you have the biggest possible advantage is that you know these people. I would argue that that's actually dreadful because they won't listen. But if you have a complete stranger telling you to stand there and smile, then you're more likely to be a little bit more obedient. Don't stand in a line. That will make people look not great. And move people by their toes.
Yes, the toes thing I found fascinating.
Could you explain the toes thing? Pointing people's toes into certain directions.
Yeah, apparently rather than getting them to move their body, it's best if you tell them where to point their toes. And if they instead, it says, I try to point people's toes in certain directions. Turning off the axis of the camera lens slims people down and makes them look.
Sorry, say
relaxed.
that again loudly.
Sorry, that's apparently what you're supposed to do. So apparently you're supposed to point your toes at 2:00, I suppose, and then you twist your head round to the camera, or you look at the camera. I'm not sure.
I can see some sort of strange spinal contortions going on here.
Sounds like
and also
some kind
trying
of
to get,
yoga.
Auntie Betty to do it after 13.
She can't feel her toes.
She hasn't felt her toes since 1987. How would you get your 20 strong gang? That's minimum. How would you feel as if they would respond if you asked them to point their toes or move their toes?
Yeah, no, that's just not going to happen. Most of the time, the way the photo happens, well, there's the thing is more than one person will take the photo, right? There's going to be at the beginning of the dinner one of the uncles that is going to go around and be like, everyone look this way. And then we're going to try and do this again. And then there's going to be one where you try and do a selfie. But this is always going to happen usually while we're seated at a table. So I would say 90% of our family Christmas photos is one person's face in the frame, the first frame, and then everyone in the table at the back kind of poking their heads over the line so that we can see everyone.
And then the Christmas hats aren't going to help.
Yeah, no, the Christmas... luckily, there's only... I would say there's about...
You're too posh for Christmas hats. Is that?
Are you joking? I was going to say,
Is it an Italian thing, Christmas hats?
No, it's but definitely in my family. My mother is a big fan of wigs and also of hats.
Fascinating.
So I think I was going to, because there's two ways for me to approach the Christmas photo. I think the only formal Christmas photo that I have with my parents and my sister was taken by my cousin. She was doing a project on family photos. And we did it around Christmas. And we all got the memo that we should look ridiculous because in this photo, my sister is sitting on a toilet with a bunch of Christmas balls around her neck. I am standing on...
She's going to thank you for mentioning this on the radio.
Yes, well, the thing is the toilet is in a bedroom because we were doing there was some renovation going on.
This is not making that better.
It's not connected, Emma. She's not using it.
I've got a great mental image.
I'll show you the photo later. I'm like on a ladder with my leg on my sister's head. My mother has got a Christmas tree on her head. And my dad, who's, bless him, the most normal one in this photo, I think is holding either a violin or a banjo. And that is his slightly more extreme thing. So we're very serious about dressing up in my family, including for Christmas.
Can I also say that we're all going to your house for Christmas Day now as a result of the description of that?
Come for Halloween as well. Halloween is another really, really big one for us.
Really?
Yeah. Halloween, any opportunity where you get to dress up is good for us.
Excellent.
Tell me to dress up, I'll always take it very, very seriously.
Brilliant. We might just do that. The time here in London is 9:27. It is time to go to Istanbul to hear from our correspondent there, Hannah Lucinda Smith. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning.
How are things with you? Calmer than round Martyrs, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's never calm in this region, I have to say, but it is at least nice weather here. I think nicer than you're having in London.
Yes, not difficult. What news from where you are?
So first of all, the big news here this week, although it hasn't made many waves outside Turkey so far, is a military plane crash in Georgia that happened on Wednesday. This was a Turkish military cargo plane. It was returning from Azerbaijan, going through Georgia, and there are some stunning videos of it almost kind of falling out of the sky. There were 20 soldiers on board. Unfortunately, all were killed. But the very, very unusual thing about this, usually in Turkey, when such a kind of tragedy happens, you would have a period of national mourning. You would have quite a lot of explanations about what's happened. In this case, neither of those have happened. There hasn't yet been an announcement of national mourning. There hasn't been any explanation of why this plane crashed in a remote area of Georgia. There's very, very many questions left unanswered, which leaves open questions given where it crashed, not far from Russia's borders, and given the fact that you might remember last December an Azerbaijan Airlines passenger plane crashed in quite a sort of nearby area. There are questions, is this some kind of strike on this plane that's happened?
Do we know, I mean, is there any indication that we do know what has happened, how this plane was downed?
Well, there seems to be two explanations being talked about by analysts. One of them is that it is strike either deliberate or accidental, as happened in December. It was Russia's missile defense systems firing on a passenger jet by accident. The other explanation is that it was a fault with the plane, but then that raises another kind of problem for Turkey, which is that then that raises questions about, the operability of its air force, how well maintained its equipment is. But it does seem like these are the only two explanations. When you look at the video of the plane coming down, it's kind of spiraling. It's clear that there are sort of pieces flying off it. It's clear that it's very, very suddenly, started coming down from the air. There was also no Mayday message as well, which suggests that it gets into trouble very, very suddenly.
If there is a suspicion that this is Russian action, what does this mean for Turkey?
It creates a very, very big diplomatic problem because, of course, Russia and Turkey have this very, very interesting relationship where in many, theatres around the world, they've been at odds, they've been rivals, they've been backing opposing proxies, particularly in Syria, but also in Nagorno-Karabakh and Libya, all over the place. On the other hand, particularly through the figures of President Erdogan and President Putin, they have this kind of alliance where we've seen things like, Turkey refusing to join in on the sanctions on Russia that were imposed by the US, by the EU, by the UK after the invasion of Ukraine. Often Turkey getting involved in negotiations, particularly between Russia and Ukraine again. And so, this kind of incident It's going to create a big problem if Russia is involved. There are precedents. We had an incident in 2020 in Syria when there were both Turkish forces and the Russian Air Force operating in the same part of northern Syria. There was a strike on an area with Turkish forces, dozens of Turkish soldiers killed. It was very much swept under the rug here in Turkey. There was very little reporting about it and therefore very little public outcry. This it would be slightly more serious, I think. It's slightly less easy to sort of sweep under the rug. But again, I think it would pose a similar kind of diplomatic problem. Neither side would want to enter into a diplomatic row. However, when you've got something like this, and especially in Turkey, it's a very militaristic country. Whenever soldiers are killed, there is a big public reaction. And if it turns out that this was, either, by accident or not, some kind of strike, I think that's going to be very, very, very hard to cover up with the public.
Indeed. And when you say that there was a strong public reaction in the past, I mean, is there a sense that the same again could happen? And because how has this actually been received locally?
Yeah, I think, from the Turks that I'm speaking to, there's confusion. I mean, here's the thing about Turkey as well. The media is so controlled, particularly the television media. When you sort of flick through the channels, you just get the same line again and again and again and again. Often, if Erdogan's talking, you flick through 4 or 5 channels and he's talking, in the same camera shot on every single one. So, and the opposition channels that are left are constantly slapped with, a week-long broadcasting ban or fines when they've done something that the censors deem they shouldn't have done. So it becomes very, very hard for the media to report this in any kind of, concrete way, doing any kind of investigation. The most that you get are, analysts talking about what the possibilities might be. But certainly, from, the sort of word on the street, the people I'm talking to, there's a kind of, confusion about particularly why the national mourning hasn't happened yet.
Let's move on to a story which sort of broke earlier on this week, which is the continued troubles for the Istanbul mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, arrested in March on charges of corruption. They now want to, the authorities now want to try him on charges that could hand him a sentence of 2,300 years in prison.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds incredible, doesn't it, when you say it out loud? It is Kafkaesque. So this is Ekrem İmamoğlu. He's the twice elected mayor of Istanbul, an incredibly popular figure, and the figure who that the opposition was hoping was going to be their candidate for the upcoming presidential elections, which are scheduled for 2028. Now, just before he was officially announced as the candidate in late March, he was arrested on corruption charges. He's been in prison ever since. There is a sense, of course, there is a sense that this is a political case. It's not the first time that a politician who's posed a threat to President Erdogan, has found themselves on the receiving end of judicial action. But this week, the prosecutors announced they are seeking sentences, hundreds of sentences, not only against İmamoğlu, actually, also against a wide range of people within the Istanbul municipal authorities who they say were involved in corruption schemes. But for İmamoğlu personally, a sentence of 2,352 years for combined offences is being sought.
Hannah, I'm going to bring in Marta Lorimer here, who specialises in far-right politics in Europe in particular, but also you specialise in situations like this where you have an erosion of democracy and you have the complete fixing of the rule of law here.
Yes, basically what I'm thinking about is what is Viktor Orban going to learn from this? Because he's also facing competition.
This is in Hungary.
This is in Hungary, yes. And I think historically, Orban hasn't really faced any real challenge to his power, because the very first thing that he did when he got into government in 2010 with a supermajority is he changed the constitution in such a way that it's basically impossible for him to lose an election. But he is right now faced with an opponent, someone who is formerly one of his supporters. He was married to one of his closest allies. And he's now managed to create a political party that looks like a real contender. So the party is called TISA, and the leader of that party is Peter Magyar. And the thing is, the real question is he going to be able to run in this election next year, or is Viktor Orban going to find some way to make sure that there is no real contention next year. So I think that he's definitely going to be looking at whether he can secure a 2,300 sentence for him of sorts.
Hannah, back in Istanbul, is there a sense that İmamoğlu will ever see the light of day?
Not in the current situation. I mean, I think it's really interesting to kind of compare his situation with that of another politician who once posed a threat to Erdogan, which is Selahattin Demirtas. He's the Kurdish leader. In the mid-2010s, he managed to sort of really bring his party up from a fringe, ethnically based party into a really wide appeal leftist party here in Turkey, and faced exactly the same treatment as İmamoğlu is facing now. He's been in prison for 9 years. He seems it might be about to be released. But at the same time, his party has been closed down. It's been decimated. He basically poses no threat to Erdogan anymore. So, I think there is this sort of trend in these, backsliding anti-democratic countries where, as soon as a figure rises up, and inevitably somebody does, and I think, local city municipalities, particularly big cities like Istanbul or like capital cities, they really are arenas where these opposition figures can kind of rise up. And we're seeing it also in New York, of course, with Mamdani as well. It's almost like a microcosm, and that becomes very, very dangerous for these kind of autocratic leaders. So I think really, to answer your question, İmamoğlu will be in prison for as long as Erdogan needs to keep him in prison to kind of neutralise the threat that he poses.
Finally, let's talk about the discovery of a temple in Turkey.
Yeah, so this is a temple of Zeus. It's not the only one, of course. There are many, many temples to Zeus, but this one is special because archaeologists have been trying to uncover it for 40 years. They started work at this site in 1982. It's down in southwestern Turkey. It's a place now called Finike, but it was part of what was called the Lycian League. This was a league of city-states during Greek and early Roman Empire times, ranging along the Turkish coast. If anyone enjoys hiking, you might have heard of the Lycian Way. It's a long hiking trail that sort of runs through much of this area. Finally, they believe they have found here the Temple of Zeus, thus proving that Zeus was the kind of ultimate deity worshipped in this particular city, now known as Finike. It's near Antalya in Turkey.
I mean, it's an absolutely gorgeous story, not least because one wonders what happened to the people who probably sort of broke Earth first in the 1980s, 42 years ago. Some of them must be almost as old as Zeus.
Right, exactly. And I don't know if you've ever been to an archaeological dig. I've been lucky enough to go to a few here in Turkey, and it's so painstaking. I mean, you realise it when you sort of see the people working there under the sun, working away for ages and ages. But I mean, 40 years, it's a long old time. Usually the soil here in Turkey is incredibly rich in these kind of things. I mean, literally whenever, something new is built in Istanbul, they always turn up a new archaeological site. So usually it's not taking 40 years to bring these things to the surface. But I'm sure if they're still around, they're going to be very, very happy and relieved to see it finally done.
Hannah Lucinda Smith in Istanbul, thank you so much for joining us on the line. I mean, what a 42-year-old project. I mean, I don't have 42 minutes to do anything. No. And it's just that wonderful, it's an absolute definition of the labour of love, isn't it, Simon?
Complete. Well, I suppose if you're an archaeologist, 42 years is nothing, isn't it, really? But
in a human life, it's a fairly large slice.
Well, it's almost your whole professional career for many people, isn't it? And the idea of, I was just, from the description there, Lucinda's description, just envisaging this vast expanse and people I've seen it with tiny brushes, brushing away soil one speck at a time or whatever. Yeah, incredible patience, but huge admiration for them.
Could you do something for 42 years, Marta?
I think the way pensions are going, I will be working for 42 years. So that could be my professional career.
That idea of patience, and there was in the past that sense that academia moved slowly.
Yes, it's no longer the case.
So what's changed?
Is neoliberalism too general an explanation? I think a lot of it has got to do with changing. There was a time where academia used to be, I suppose, a curiosity-driven endeavour. So what you are researching is something that you're interested in and that is worth it for itself. Increasingly, we've moved into a situation where there's a lot more focus on doing research that is somehow socially useful or that has impact. And that is the research that is getting funded. Now, because British universities, but also this is a problem more globally, are increasingly struggling with funding, there is more and more pressure to try and get external grants in, which means that the kind of research that is prized is research that is going to have impact and that might also have to come out quickly. If on top of that you put on the so-called publish or perish model of academia where, if you are not publishing, then you are not going to advance, you're not going to progress in any way in your career, then slow research is gone, because publish or perish requires you to keep publishing constantly. And that means, and you can't really produce research findings at the speed required by this module, particularly if you're also trying to teach and do the other thing, and apparently be also a psychologist for your students, which is part of our job these days, and an administrator. I think academics have like 16 jobs, one of which we're qualified for, and then the others that is just like, yeah, we're going to have to tack this on because someone has to do it and it's going to be you. Okay. No.
Simon, let's move on. Let's try and find some stories that that have caught our eye this weekend. What did you haul out of the world of news media? Because there's no real one big story this weekend, is there? The papers are sort of ploughing their own furrow a little bit.
Yeah, there's a variety of stories. I'm just thinking about the neoliberal thing that you were mentioning there, Marta. There's one of the stories that's been running all week and seems to be really gaining momentum is this, what some people might say, a split in the MAGA coalition. So we've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, the senator from, Congresswoman, isn't she, from Georgia, who has always been a huge supporter, of course, of Donald Trump, who is now claiming, most recently in the last day or so, that after he described her as a traitor, she's actually fearing for her safety, and she's in conversations with security firms who are going to protect her. Trump has also described her as a ranting lunatic, wacky Marjorie, which is ironic because there are so many people who would have agreed with that, but now Trump is obviously supporting that view as well.
Just remind us what she did before it went wrong.
So what's really upset Trump is that she is one of a growing number of Republicans who is pressing for the more publications of the texts, the documents relating to Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, ironically, as you remember, this is a story that Trump started as part of his election campaign and got all that business of the conspiracy theory. It's now come back to bite him because there's more and more evidence, of course, that he had this very close relationship with Epstein. And so, yes, Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of a number of Republicans who's saying we need to publish this stuff and we need to get this out there. And I think what's interesting about this story is the question, this publication of the Epstein files is very popular amongst the MAGA rank and file. And I think if you look in the last couple of weeks, we've had this, the president's approval rating is now -18. We've had success for the Democrats in New York, in Virginia, in New Jersey. The question is whether he is losing his MAGA base on the issue of Epstein, and whether Marjorie Taylor Greene and others are actually more representative of those ordinary MAGA followers.
It's a tricky way. It's tricky to read nowadays because the more extreme the stories that come out of the United States and the Epstein issues and the MAGA issues, and even the construction of the ballroom, the destruction of the East Wing, portrays a picture of a single man who is wreaking havoc in the United States, and it's too easy from the outside to say there is just a madman in the White House and this is what he's doing. But there is, nonetheless, despite the dip, there is a large proportion of the United States voters who still believe that he is a good president.
Of course. But there's also, I think, the problem with the great man theory and just focusing on Trump is that it obscures the fact that there's Donald Trump, of course. There's a bunch of enablers that are supporting him that aren't really pushing back, right? The previous Trump administration, there was at least a little bit of pushback and some attempt at steering him on and keeping him on some kind of course. That's no longer there. And there's also, I think it is true that some voters will be moving away from supporting Trump because they thought that he stood for something that he obviously doesn't really seem to be standing for, or that he is actually actively making their lives worse because things are going to start costing more. And of course, the whole Epstein thing, like the whole QAnon crowd, the big MAGA crowds, these are people who they were talking about Pizzagate. They were talking about Democrats being pedophiles. How do you reconcile this with actual evidence that the man that you have promoted to become president of the United States may have been involved in stuff that is a lot sketchier than whatever they were accusing the Democrats of, with not a single bit of evidence? So I think some of them are going to be turning around. But the point is, and this is where it gets really, really challenging. Once you have an autocrat in government, first of all, you don't really know if they're going to leave by the time the end of their term comes.
Well, Trump for 2028, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know if that's going to happen. And the other thing is, even if they do end up leaving, they will have done so much damage to institutions that it's really, really hard to roll back. And then next thing you know, maybe Trump doesn't get reelected. Maybe they get themselves together. We're not going to swear on radio. But then there's someone else who will have probably learned a useful lesson from this and that could take it even in an even more extreme direction. So it's not like you say, oh, well, Trump is gone, where everything is fine, everything is good. No, you could get someone who's plausibly worse than him.
And I think it's also interesting how the debate and the discussion is now moving on almost post-Trump. I mean, apparently Trump has a 2028 baseball cap in his closet, but there has been a discussion over the last few months, and I think we're seeing more of that, of what happens given his age. If he has lost the MAGA base, who takes over from Trump? Who is the next candidate?
What the New York Times is reporting this morning is that blurring between public and private, and there are pictures of it. The headline is "Blending Family and Governance. Trump Organization talks real estate deal with Saudis." It says the chief executive of a Saudi firm says a Trump-branded project is just a matter of time. The Trump Organization's major foreign partner is also signalling new Saudi deals. What is happening behind closed doors is not just problematic in terms of the separation of state and the private sector, but the message it sends out to other nations as well. Is that what you talk about, Marta? Not just in terms of the effect that it will have on America, but the narrative it will set for future leaders in different countries.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's not like the US are doing anything particularly new, right? I'm Italian. I remember Berlusconi. Berlusconi was the ultimate example of a politician that used public office to further his personal business interests. And at the time, it was really hard to actually pursue him for anything because of, as sort of stressing that there's conflict of interest, partially because what you do, well, you delegate stuff to your children, so you still keep it in the family. So the US isn't really doing something that's particularly new. This being said, one of the things that made the US a reliable country was that you thought that this stuff wouldn't happen, that there would be this kind of separation, and that gave you as a business a lot of certainty that you would not rely on your personal ties with the government for success. We are moving away from that. Donald Trump has made it blatantly clear that if he doesn't like you and if a business you are not showing your support for him, he is going to come for you. And that is not... It's when you're making business reliant on personal ties, that's not a good look and it's not reassuring.
And it made me think actually about what's been happening in Ukraine this week, the corruption in terms of the energy supply and the fact that I think the Justice Minister and the Energy Minister have both been sacked. And you automatically think, oh, goodness me, it's the Ukrainian corruption problem again. Something that, Zelensky was elected in to fix long before Russia mounted its full-scale invasion. The fact remains that, yes, corruption is there. It is a huge problem. There is money that has been sent from abroad with the best will in the world to help the Ukrainians fight the Russians, and yet it seems to have been siphoned off into unknown destinations. But the fact remains is that you actually have a president saying, we acknowledge that there is corruption. We are going to try to sort it out. And here is the action that we are taking.
And I think it's particularly important, of course, in Ukraine, given the terrible jeopardy that the country is in. We really don't need, or they don't need this. The rest of the world, or the free world anyway, really doesn't need this kind of corruption to raise its head. I think the thing with Trump, though, I'm afraid to say, I think for a lot of voters, looking, as you say, at that story in the New York Times, and as you were saying, Marta, about his blurring the lines, or actually just sweeping away the lines between his office, his presidential office, and his own private business interests. For a lot of voters, actually, I don't think that matters so much. I think, and there is evidence to show some polling that people think, well, Trump, he's very successful. He's a rich man. If he can get rich and he's leading our country, I can get rich as well. What I think will really do for Trump, what will really be his undoing, is not that so much, but it'll be something really simple like the cost of groceries and putting gas in the car. And already, that's how he got into power, because he successfully pointed the finger of blame at the Democrats for rising prices, whatever was happening to the economy more generally. And I think that is probably what's going to be his undoing this time.
This leads us to an article that you've spotted in Politico about how, talking about putting gas in the car, but how there is that inspiration being taken from Trump in the European Union in terms of green rules being pushed to one side, because Trump has obviously done, the drill baby drill motto has travelled.
Yeah, it's not so much that the motto has travelled, it's also that there's been a shift in terms of sort of within the EU dynamics, right? The 2019 EU elections returned a pretty sizable number of green parties, which essentially pushed EU policy making into a greener direction. And now they're trying to roll back on this because they've decided that this was creating way too many demands on businesses. And saying, well, look, if Europe is going to be competitive and we have against the United States and against China, then we cannot have too many rules. Like, we actually have to make it easier to do business. Now, the problem is that what happened this week is that the EU, the European Commission, is trying to roll back on some of the rules that were put in place in the previous parliament. And, for example, changing reporting needs for companies. And not only, but they're doing this with the votes of the far right. So on Wednesday or Thursday this week, for the very first time in the EU, we saw a legislative measure passed with the votes of the centre-right and all of the far-right bloc. This has never happened before. It's really unprecedented, and it's a worrying trend because it shows you that there is an alternative majority in the European Union, and it's bringing and it's normalizing essentially voting with the far right. So they've called this, usually we talk about a grand coalition in the European Union where the centre-right, the centre-left and the centre all vote together. They're calling this the Giorgia coalition after Giorgia Meloni, because Meloni is in government with the centre-right and another far-right party. And so this is really, it's really going to change the dynamics of EU policy making going forward.
EU Parliament changed quite a lot last June when the elections took place, and they moved much further to the right.
Exactly.
It actually, to be honest, it surprises me it's taken them that long to actually, 18 months for this to actually manifest itself in a vote.
Yeah, just about a year. But this is the point is that the far right doesn't really always work as a unified bloc. So there's about 24% of EU MEPs belong to a far right group, and they're divided in 3 different groups. So they still struggle to work cohesively. And you also have to bear in mind that in the European Parliament, most laws are sort of hyper-consensual. So you are going to pass something that will be voted by 70% of the MEPs. This is an interesting measure, though, because it is one that split the Grand Coalition, because the left wanted to keep those more protective measures in place, whereas the right was more in favour of this sort of ease of doing business. But it's also created some slightly paradoxical situations where the boss of Nutella was complaining that they were going to roll back on these things, because he said, we invested so much money in bringing up our reporting to speed so that we could comply with this legislation. Why are you now removing that? You've asked us this massive investment and now you're backtracking. So again, this is going to be a problem for the EU because, again, one of the things that made the EU a reliable place to do your business in is that you knew that there were rules and that they were going to pretty much stick to the rules. Now we're getting to a point where you're like, yeah, we're going to make the rules and then they're going to last for like 5 years and then we are going to be rolling them back because we think that there's different priorities now.
And there's also something that you want to draw attention to, which is, and bring Simon in on this one, is that Jordan Bardella, who's the leader of the far right, he is part of the National Rally. The de facto leader of the National Rally is Marine Le Pen, but she has been convicted of, I think it's electoral fraud, isn't it?
Not electoral fraud, embezzlement.
Embezzlement, apologies. Yes. The fact remains, though, is that she is now, as it stands, barred from running for president. And Jordan Bardella, the young, sparky, attractive, dynamic young man he is poised to take the helm. Is he ready, do you think?
I think that's really the question, because up until now, Marine Le Pen was very much in denial. She kept saying, no matter what, I'm going to run. But I think she's realized that if they return a decision on whether she can run in, basically, I think we would be looking at January 2027, she wouldn't have time to run in a presidential election. So she's said, fine, if I'm still barred from running after my appeal, Bardella will run. And I think the party seems to be falling back in line with this option, but it is going to be a massive challenge. Bardella is very young. We've already seen in kind of the campaign for the legislative elections last year, he started struggling a little bit. So it's going to be interesting to see how well he holds up to the really, really tough scrutiny that a French presidential candidate goes for.
It is interesting, isn't it, that one of the reasons why Marine Le Pen was so successful and did so well is she detoxified the brand after her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who was very anti-Semitic, for instance. And now Bardella has detoxified it a little bit further, hasn't he? I mean, I think he's a fascinating politician, just in whatever you think of his policies. But the idea he's young, good-looking, charismatic, brilliant on social media. He's already written his biography, hasn't he? He has a sense of vision. He has charisma. So I think he's going to be very well placed, in the next election. And like you say, Marta, I think the feeling is that thank you very much, Marine. You've done a great job, but now it's time to hand it over to the new generation. And so he's very much a politician of our time, isn't he, really, I think? But as you say, part of the challenge will be, as somebody who's briefed politicians, how you then brief somebody like that so that when they are pushed on the detail of policy, that at least they've got something to say, even if they don't actually specify any details.
You work with sort of politicians, young and old, in terms of their communications and what have you. What is Bardella in need of doing, and how actually does the rest of French politics stop him if that is what they want to happen?
What I would say, for his point of view, I'd say carry on doing what he's doing because he is being very successful. For the rest of French politics, the problem is it's very fragmented, isn't it? And the question is how the Mélenchon left and the Greens and what's left of the Macron coalition, can they somehow come together and form an alternative? But I think the problem is for them that if you look at the sort of themes of where France is going and the situation it's in, Bardella is answering a lot of those questions more effectively, or at least more simply and attractively than his opponents are. So, obviously the real thing is French debt, but that's another thing that we probably won't hear a lot of.
Which we won't be able to talk about because we've run out of time on the programme. Thank you so much to Simon, Brooke and Marta Lorimer and all your family for coming into the studio to join us today. Thank you, Marta. Hannah Lucinda Smith on the line from Istanbul and Tyler Brûlé in Lisbon. The programme was produced by Desiree Bandley and Mariella Bevan. Our studio engineer was Steph Chungu. I'm Emma Nelson. Monocle on Sunday returns next week. It's coming from Zurich with Tyler back behind the microphone. But until then, goodbye, thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your weekend.